Thank you, Erin, for hitting record. And so after this presentation, we'll be moving into our Q&A or hopefully discussion segment, and really looking forward to hearing all your questions, but also what you all are thinking about in terms of the kinds of more complex proposals you're interested in pursuing. And we'll have Kim's team on hand to talk about sort of the UVA context in particular, if there are questions about how you can access resources on grounds. Okay. So for this presentation, it'll be a little briefer, but we're really going to be underscoring that these large proposals require not just collaboration, but very much a strategic approach. That really is the case with all grant seeking, but it becomes essential to success at this level. Giving some tips for how you can develop your strategy. Again, thinking about defining your vision and theme aligned with sponsor expectations, assessing your competitiveness, writing and refining your proposal, and moving towards the practice of team science. So in a way, it's a little bit like the first presentation, but talking about this even more sophisticated and complicated level of grant seeking. So what do we mean when we talk about a large or complex grant? So there's a spectrum within this world as well of large and complex. The NSF Engines proposal I was talking about is exceptionally large, and the funding for that is 120 million. There are others that are much more modest than that, but still within that realm of large and complex. You're going to see some combination of multidisciplinary, and here it's academic disciplines, but it might even extend beyond academic disciplines. So you begin to see sort of multi-sector as well, even beyond kind of academia. You might have partnerships where you're working with community partners, or you're working with K-12 school systems, or you're working with industry, more complex. Multi-investigator, so grants across the board still follow the hierarchy of having a lead investigator and a lead applicant. But as we saw in that helpful continuum diagram, for these more complex grants, although you do have a lead, and if you are the lead applicant, you are still accountable for that project, it really is sort of a leadership of many, and it's a leadership of peers. And so it's a different kind of collaboration where you are really pulling along people who have your same level of investment really in the project. Multi-organization. So, it's not uncommon to have multiple academic institutions, but as I mentioned, also other kinds of organizations at the table. And multi-phase. So common in multi-investigator grants for you to have maybe a 3-year timeline to do a more complex or ambitious research project. Common for these kinds of grants for it to have maybe a 10-year horizon. And that 10 years are broken up into phases, where you might have a planning phase, and then you might have different implementation phases, and you might really have an evaluation phase, where evaluation becomes a really important piece of what you're doing. And often these kinds of larger complex grants also want to see evidence in your planning that you've thought even beyond that 10-year horizon for how the investment will be sort of sustained and continue to evolve. So it's a much longer time frame than you may be used to if you've done mainly single investigator grants to date. And then the multi-million dollars. So this is one of the reasons that institutions like UVA are excited about these opportunities. But of course, we know that those large investments translate into robust, hopefully very robust returns on investment in terms of multiple levels of academic, social, economic, and other kinds of impact. And multi-component, so they're complex. You have more complex strategic plans that you lattice more complex activities. So this is what we mean. It's hard to come up with a singular definition, but if it's extra complex, if you have that word multi appearing many times, then you are probably moving into this kind of territory where you need to really center collaboration. the complexity of those components need to also be deeply integrated. So sometimes working on projects like this feels like pulling together something like an institutional strategic plan. Everything needs to be, I like the word latticed. And you're thinking about how the disciplines, the components, and the various organizations and partners all are necessary for the success and for the hoped for impacts of the project. So just pulling back this terrific graphic again to illustrate, in addition to that continuum of collaboration, you see that you have greater and greater complexity as you move up the spectrum. And you also have a more of a porous kind of complexity. So, when you have a multi-investigator project, it's relatively time-bound, it's relatively clear to know, what you have to do when and when you're done. When you're in that team science end of the spectrum, there's a lot of adaptive management. There's a lot of things that could happen. And so one of the tasks as the grant writer or on a team of grant writers for projects like this is to sort of balance your own uncertainty around the universe of things that could be done and that could happen as these things are implemented, and balance that with the need to have a clear plan. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to get into that domain and figure out how to kind of wrangle many components into something that feels coherent enough that you're able to persuade the funder that you will be able to pull it off, even if it adapts and it becomes even more complex in the implementation phase, that you are organized enough that you will be able to adapt with those conditions and ultimately still produce that return on investment in terms of the impacts you want to have. So similar to the first presentation, there are different phases as you're considering whether to do this kind of proposal production. You're familiarizing yourself with the opportunity and with your own resources, whether it truly is a good fit, really taking a hard look at that. And then you are developing the sort of apparatus around which you will write the proposal. So you're developing the team, you're developing the network of partners, you're developing really what is a strategic plan. So your vision, your goals and objectives, the activities that you're going to lattice along that, how you're going to evaluate it. There's a lot of just design and planning work before you even get to the writing stage. And then you are in that writing up and giving yourselves plenty of time for that kind of more complex review and collaborative writing that we talked about in the last presentation. So it's very helpful when you're working on these more complex proposals. I mentioned that you still will have a lead PI and a lead applicant institution, but it becomes even more of a shared investment of time among the different investigators and different key partners, the core partners of the project team. So although you might be the lead PI, you want to help others who join the project and proposal production team to know that they should also really be reading the RFP and digesting it. They should be grappling with it at just about the same level that you are. They should be helping to identify the questions that are needed for program officers for clarification. They should also be familiarizing themselves with that funder's giving history and their priorities, and considering how that approach fits within the ecosystem that you all are operating in. So it becomes even more of a team effort, and it's helpful to talk about that early on, because it's really not possible, although you need to have a champion, you need to have somebody who ultimately is helping to steward and sustain enthusiasm for the effort. You don't want it all to just fall on one person. That's not sustainable or realistic with projects like these. And so again, when you are assessing, if you're competitive and you're asking your collaborators to help actively support that assessment, it becomes another good moment to make sure, should we move forward? Do we really have what it takes? Do we have the time? Do we have the support? Or is this something that we should wait and see if it comes around the next time, or if we go for the next cycle? So doing that assessing competitiveness and that reality testing is important, because again, you're investing potentially hundreds of hours in pulling together one of these proposals. But all of the same principles that we talked about in the first presentation still apply in terms of how you assess competitiveness and how you make sure that your ideas align with the funder's ideas. It's not chasing funding, but it is sort of adapting according to what the funder is prioritizing. So it's a bit of a creative dance that you will undertake, and do that, work with your collaborators, really take a hard look and do that together. If you go through that process and decide to move forward, you will only have a stronger set of ideas and a stronger grasp of the work ahead by having taken a hard look. A large, complex proposal, you'll need to show evidence in your narrative, in your budget, and in all of your accompanying documents that not only is your idea strong, the project you're proposing to implement and all the activities, not only is it based in evidence, not only is it data driven in the sense of the need it's trying to meet, not only has it been very thoughtfully considered in terms of the strategic plan and the different activities that you might undertake, but also, do you have the team? Do you have the wherewithal to pull it off? So reviewers are going to be looking as much for evidence of strong planning as they are for all the other pieces. And again, I think people understand that if you get one of these funded, some of the plan, some of the blueprint may need to adapt. Some conditions may change. Some, that's what you can update sponsors with in your reporting. So it's not that every single thing you propose has to be implemented exactly as you proposed it. But for these complex proposals, it's more that you show evidence that you are a very strong planner and that your team has a strong collaboration record, such that you will be able to steer this pretty massive effort through a changing landscape of conditions over potentially a 10-year timeline. So that becomes just very, very important. So as part of doing all of this assessing and planning, you are working with your collaborators to define and clarify your vision. You're developing the strategic framework that's like the infrastructure on which not only the project hangs, but in the short term, the proposal itself is going to hang. So really taking time before you start writing to define that stuff is super important. Gaining a sense of consensus, whether you do that in a more or less formal way, that people are enthusiastic about the plan that's been identified and that they can be ambassadors for it. So again, for these larger complex proposals, you have your project team, you have the people who are in those planning meetings and who might be helping to pull the proposal together. But then you also have another universe of potential partners and collaborators who you need to reach out to at some point sooner than later, ideally. So you need to be ambassadors also for that vision and be able to pitch it, not just to the funder, but to that other tier of collaborators. And you want to be able to talk about this project in relation to the landscape in which you are embedded in your institution and beyond. So often these projects are beyond the scale of the institution, and you want to have a strong handle, a sort of data-based handle on the landscape in which you are embedding this work and the impact and the synergy that is likely to happen as a result. So doing learning about that on the front end and keeping citations, keeping references, keeping data that you can use for the proposal development is very helpful. So similar to we talked about in the first presentation, when you are at that stage of actually writing, it becomes a project management process. It's as much about the planning and the management as it is about the quality of the writing. So you want to have a very thoughtful checklist. You want to create templates that align with the solicitation and help you to write a narrative that allows reviewers to really check the boxes as they read, while also being exciting and persuasive and compelling. You want to have a clear sense of your timeline with your internal deadlines and key milestones, such as when you will have drafts done, when drafts will be out for review by whom, when you will have letters of support in, when things have to go to OSP for technical review, and you want to have allocation of roles and make sure that people are bought into those roles and feel accountable to those deadlines. And then you want to make sure, whether it's you or you are working with a collaborator or two on this for these larger proposals, you want to make sure that at the end of the day, somebody is accountable for giving it that unified voice, for taking the patchwork of all these contributions and making sure that you have a persuasive, compelling grant in the end. And not forgetting that your narrative is just one piece of an overall package, and you need to build in that time to assemble all those pieces and make sure they're all technically compliant and complete. Okay, so as a reminder, why are we doing all of this? It's very intricate, it's time consuming, but we do it because it's also tremendously exciting. Agencies are looking to invest towards the returns that they desire, and public agencies hopefully have desires and visions for society that we share as well, trying to advance knowledge, trying to advance innovation, trying to advance equity, trying to advance the social good. Team science is an umbrella term for how we can think about these kinds of synergies that pull in many disciplines and many kinds of sectors to help address known challenges in research and in broader society. We are, in undertaking this, we're breaking disciplinary and demographic silos. We're breaking out of knowledge isolation. We're breaking out of limited scopes. We're trying to have larger impacts. And we're trying to leverage synergy so that those impacts can ripple even beyond what we can do at our single institution. Team science as a catalyst for change. Difficult to pull off, complicated. The complexity starts even at the proposal assessment stage, but the payoff is potentially very exciting and very long-term. You can optimize a team science approach by really thinking of it as a thread that's going to go throughout the rest of your career. So hearkening back to that spectrum graphic, the team science or the big C collaboration, it's bigger than any one opportunity. It's about building a network and sustaining a network that can mobilize and pivot for other opportunities. So you can take care of that network and cultivate it and curate it by following through on opportunities to pursue funding and publish together, scheduling time with your collaborators to regularly discuss big ideas and shared goals, even outside of particular funding opportunities. So remember, moving towards being proactive and not always reactive with funding opportunities means actually carving out time and space to talk about what you might want to pursue and look for funding with your collaborators outside of the sort of big opportunity that has just dropped. And then you want to be a strong collaborator. You want to have strong relationships. So you want to highlight the contributions of the people that you are collaborating with. You want to celebrate and amplify their successes, appreciate them for doing that for you. And be thinking about the next project, be having that kind of forward mindset so that, again, you're not just kind of scrambling when the opportunities come, but you are anticipating that these are the trends in grant seeking, these are the trends in federal grant making. There will be opportunities to participate in this kind of work if you are ready, if you have done that thinking ahead of time, if you have built that capacity, and if you are taking care of these relationships. And a key thing to do in that regard is actually to stay in close contact with Kim and her team and others who can support you in being prepared to take advantage of these pretty exciting grant opportunities that are coming down the pipe, and who, they have the expertise to make sure that they can navigate you to those resources and help you successfully do all the things that we've talked about in this presentation. Whether it's on the first attempt or the second attempt or the third attempt, these are all skills that you will build over time as you practice them. That's something I've experienced, and I keep building those skills every day as I work in this field. So with that, I am actually going to ask Kim to join me on video again to offer some thank yous to all of you for your attention. I just first want to say I really, really enjoyed and appreciated the opportunity to share some of these ideas with you all, to sort of synthesize and reflect on some of what I've learned by working on these projects over the years. And I look forward to our Q&A and discussion after Kim's remarks.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for putting together such a wonderful workshop for us. I think your insights and your expertise, we are so grateful to have them, and you did a great job of sharing all of that with us today. So thank you on behalf of UVA for presenting that to us. And then I just want to thank everyone here for attending today and making time to stick with this. We've noticed that nearly everyone who started on the webinar is still on the webinar nearly 2 hours later. So thank you for making time for this. This is an important aspect of what UVA is doing to move into the future with our research enterprise. And we appreciate your time. So please keep an eye out for a post-event survey that will be coming from me or my team in the next couple of hours. We'll be sending that out. We do hope that you'll respond to that so that you can give us your feedback and we can continue to improve this and also continue to build additional webinars following up on these ideas, particularly those that you'd like to have covered in more depth in the future. Take a look at our website. Again, if you want to connect with anyone in particular in the Office for Research Development, our website is on the screen and I will throw it into the chat as well. And if you'd like to request a consultation with one of the research development specialists, please reach out directly to me and make that request. Those initial consultations are only about 20 minutes long, and it's really to get an idea of who you are and what your project is so that we can start to figure out how we can best support you. So with that, that's all we've got, Christina, and I think we could open it up to Q&A at this point.